No, it's brilliant today to recognise new adopters of the Charter. But I suppose first, before we do that, we're just going to maybe give you a recap of, I suppose, some of the timelines and altitude and where we're at with it in terms of adoption. So I suppose in this wee part of the session, we'll take stock of where we're at in terms of altitude. We're going to celebrate those new institutions and give them a chance to share, I suppose, their motivations for adoption and where they're headed with it from the stage. Have a wee chat as well after that. And then we're going to close the session just to get a really small sample of early examples of impact that we've seen in our own work. Some have actually, which have been referenced over yesterday, but yeah, just get a small snapshot of where we are with that. We intend in ahead to do much more deeper evaluative exercise around that once we have a couple of years worth of data to capture. So just a reminder for everybody, we kind of talk like we can't spend a huge amount of time going into what the Charter is every time we do these events. So we're kind of relying a little bit on some of being quite socialised at this stage. But just to take a step back to say, well, what is actually the mission of the Altitude Project? Well, it's to support HEIs and ETBs to make sustainable progress towards systemically embedding a universal design approach. And that's really one which aims to place human diversity at the heart of tertiary education design. It's about fostering student success for all. Obviously, as an organisation who's there promoting access and participation and success for disabled people, a lot of our framing comes from that. But of course, universal design is much broader than that, and is about serving the needs of the whole student population and indeed our staff populations. And so I think the really important bit, which I've highlighted here, is that I think Louise spoke to it very well in her opening. It's about sustainable progress. So it's that sort of, we recognise that universal design is process, not destination, and it's about taking where you are and making incremental, iterative progress on these things, rather than trying to get some sort of overnight transformation. That those types of things tend to be quite snake oil salesmen-y and tend not to work and last the distance. So this is about taking a much more slow and steady wins the race approach to embedding universal design. So just a little reminder of the altitude timeline. I suppose because the development cycle itself was quite rigorous and took quite some time, people can kind of think like altitude has been around quite a long time. I think we mentioned, I think it was Maureen yesterday mentioned, I think it was 3 years ago at the HEAD conference that we did the first public consultation, and that feels like a long time. But actually, the development process was started just about 6 months before that, in October of the previous year. We had the actual launch of the PUP Charter in March 2024, so just 2 years ago at this conference. And then this time last year became the first time that you could actually adopt as an institution. So we launched it with the aim of kickstarting as a project group a national conversation around this stuff, giving institutions time to really digest it, see what it would mean for them. And it actually only became available to adopt this time last year. So obviously we're now at the inaugural Altitude Summit, which is kind of beginning to take stock of where that's happened. So this is where we're at 1 year on from adoption becoming available, and I'm including our 3 new adopters today in these figures. But we have 23 organisations on board Altitude, and that includes 10 of the 16 education and training boards, which is a really powerful statement in that sector. We have 7 of the 19 publicly funded HEA institutions, and I'm discounting those. Those are the student-facing institutions that are HEA funded, and we have 4 private or other institutions who don't quite fit in those brackets, and also 2 national agencies, interestingly, our representative bodies, which have decided to adopt from their own perspectives about how they can support as supporting organisations or policy organisations in that space. So now we are getting to the stage of waving some balloons around. I should have brought these balloons over, but I just want to pay a huge credit to 3 new institutions who are coming on board today, and that's Teagasc, City Colleges Dublin, and KCETB. It's lovely to see 3 very diverse institutions in and of itself. 3 institutions that are quite different in their own context, coming on board and joining this train. And it's been one of the lovely surprises for me as we've begun to move through this, is that of course, we've been on the roadshow, myself, Maureen, and others in the project group around the country trying to advocate for this and get people interested in it. But a lot of our focus has been on those publicly funded HEIs and the ETBs. but actually we're getting lots of interest from organisations that are coming to us to say, from the private colleges sector, from other parts of the system, saying we want in on this. We get that this is important, and we want to be on board in this. So I think instinctively now in the sector there's a growing recognition for the need for this, that doesn't have to be driven all the time from the top, from policy. People get the inherent value in this as a concept in terms of universal design being. Stage, all three of our guests. So what we're going to do is our three guests are going to sit up here. So it's Dr. Anne-Marie Butler from Teagasc, it's Karen Higgins from City College Group Dublin, and it's Martha Bulger from KCETB. And I'm going to invite Anne-Marie to join us at the podium, and the two others to sit down first, and each will have a chance to say their piece. But can you give them a huge round of applause and welcome their adoption of the Charter?
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honour to be here this morning on behalf of Teagasc, and I suppose to pledge our commitment to this wonderful journey that many of you are already on, and that we at Teagasc are delighted. I had a great day here yesterday. I was bubbling away yesterday evening thinking of all the things that we heard, and all the bits and pieces that maybe we're already doing in Teagasc that maybe we haven't realised, and yet all the wonderful people that no doubt I'll be emailing next week saying, do you mind if we have a chat? Because there was just such wonderful positivity in every room. And even in the hackathon, I commented to somebody that when somebody said, now 60 seconds, go, I thought we're spending too much time in meetings talking and not doing. And then when you're challenged to do something in 60 seconds, it's amazing what you'll do. So very briefly, a bit of an introduction to Teagasc for people who are not aware. We're the Agriculture and Food Development Authority in Ireland. It's a national body providing integrated research, advisory and education. And we're across 52 locations. I'm based myself in Kildalton in South Kilkenny, but our head office is in Oak Park in Carlow. And what's been really interesting yesterday, and even this morning with my colleagues, we were just saying we're kind of like outliers. I'm an only child myself, so I don't have any bother with being on my own. Or my kids used to say, were you ever lonely? And I said, I was never lonely, I was only. But Teagasc, we're not an ETB. We're not funded by DFRIS. We sit within the Department of Agriculture. And that brings advantages, but it also brings challenges. So even when Richard was chatting there, we're not eligible for the fund for students with disabilities. We're not eligible for SUSI. Now we have lots of workarounds that we try and do, but for us, where has Altitude come from? And where Altitude has come from is, in my role as head of education, I want to ensure that every learner has at least an equivalent experience as a learner in another further education course. And today and yesterday already have been very powerful, because I couldn't do this without the two colleagues here in the room, Gavin and Deirdre. I want to give Gavin Deedy a particular shout out. Gavin joined us from UCC about 6 months ago, and it was Gavin who introduced Altitude to me. Deirdre is assistant principal in the Botanic Gardens and is our access officer, and I suppose has been living the benefits of UDL and Altitude for many years, and now suddenly we have found a home. Our learners are in agriculture, horticulture, equine and forestry. It's level 5 and level 6 courses, full-time, part-time, and 3 years ago we were delighted to work with the Higher Education Authority and Solus. We've launched apprenticeships. So we now have apprenticeships in agriculture, horticulture and sports turf, and they're higher education awards. So for us, our motivation, as I said, has been that equivalence of learner experience. There isn't anybody in the Department of Agriculture responsible for education. So we're trying to push the door, and we're trying to just ensure that everything that Altitude offers is at least what our learners will have. We developed an education strategy. It was launched last year, approved by our governing board, and within that we have 19 actions. One of the actions was in relation to admissions policy and entry requirements, but one other action was in relation to the development of UDL policy. And I suppose that's why Altitude fits so nicely with what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and Altitude has become the vehicle for us to, I suppose, to strengthen what we do and to do it with even more defined purpose. Yesterday, a big takeaway for me was the involvement of the student voice, and I probably was making a little note to self on that. We've done a lot in the last 6 months of engaging with our senior leadership team, our teachers, our college principals, all of our staff, but maybe we have not done enough with our students. So that was a big takeaway from yesterday. And even the ATU video of the marketing student wandering around campus. And we have a colleague who works with us, Frank, and Frank is great. He has often said to Gavin and myself, if I met altitude in the corridor, I wouldn't know what it looks like. So for us now, the journey begins to normalise the conversation. There was so many bits that we already do that maybe we didn't see them as UDL. I said we have senior management buy-in, but I suppose we have a bit of a journey as well in terms of how we can strengthen, as I said, if it's those funding opportunities, the experiences that others are having that we can bring into our classrooms. And I must commend all of our teachers and technicians. It's a very practical course that we develop. It's maybe 50% out and about on farms, on horses, in polytunnels, and then how can we make that learning a better experience? So very briefly, and just to, I suppose, to finish up, some of the things we've done and will continue to do, we're currently in the process of revalidating our agriculture programme. For people who are involved in that, we're looking at the PDAS, the new programme-derived award standard, and away from the common awards. A big piece of this, and it's Gavin who's thought us this, is that, you know, UDL cannot be a bolt-on. UDL has to sit at the centre. So it's very good timing. We used to have 15 learning objectives in modules. We're stripping all of that back. You know, how can we make life easier for everybody, including staff? You know, we are a little bit obsessed with assessment in Teagasc. How do we step back from that? So we've developed communities of practice. We're looking at workshops on UDL, and we're just trying to, I suppose, normalise the conversation. And even little bits and pieces that are happening every day that maybe many of my colleagues, and I put my hand as well, just weren't aware of how much we're doing. So Altitude now will allow us to put a structure on that. We're across, in education, we're across 4 Teagasc colleges. We're in Clonakilty, in lovely West Cork, Kildalton, in Kilkenny, the Botanic Gardens here in Dublin, and Ballyhaise College up in Cavan. And then we work really closely with 3 private colleges, the Palace Kenry down in Limerick, Gerteen in Tipperary, and Mount Bellew in Galway. So we have, I suppose, a footprint of about 3,500 learners across the 7 locations, and then we work with a lot of the higher education providers. So one of our strengths is our spread, and it's also then the challenge. So how do we ensure that Altitude, as we adopt it and as we develop it, is consistently applied across all locations, even though I said there's different courses. So look, it's a really exciting time. I'm genuinely honoured to be here. I previously worked in UCD, and then I sold my soul to banking, which nearly caused my mother to fall off the chair at the time. I worked with Ulster Bank for 15 years, and I joined Teagasc 4 years ago. And the amount I've learned from the learners and from staff in 4 years has been powerful. And the amount I've even learned from yesterday and this morning has been huge. So I just want to thank everybody, to thank Dara. I know Lorraine has often come to Teagasc to help us and open doors. And I suppose finally I do want to thank Gavin Deedy. We described Gavin as turning on, or showing us light switches we didn't even know where they were. And that's what Altitude means to us. So Gorgeous live Galer, agus Gordon Mila Malduth.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. I really enjoyed that piece, especially for me. The thing that stuck out to me was, and I'm hearing this across the board, is that Altitude is also, although it's in a framework for improvement and advancing universal design, it's also a way to recognise what is really strong already there and actually join the dots between them as well. So thank you so much for that. So kind of welcome next to the stage, Karen Higgins from City College Group. Could you give them a big round of applause for adopting the charter?
Morning, everyone. That was a hard act to follow now. I'm going to feel really, really nervous here. My name is Karen Higgins, and I am the Director of Quality for Academic Affairs for City College Dublin. We're a private education provider working across both higher education and further education. We're quite small, although when you see our student body around our campus, you wouldn't kind of think that. We have approximately 500 higher education students and in excess of 2,000 further education students, most of whom access our programmes online from the further education point of view, but on site from our higher education students. We have a wide, diverse student population, ranging from school leavers to mature learners, career changers and international students. So diversity is very much part of our everyday reality. And that's what really led us towards Altitude. Our decision to adapt Altitude wasn't driven by policy or compliance requirements. It was very much a values-led decision. as a private provider, we don't operate under the same public sector duties, but we do see every day the complexity and diversity of learner needs. Universal design gives us a framework to respond to that diversity in a proactive way, designing learning experiences that work for as many students as possible from the very beginning, from the outset. So instead of constantly reacting and putting supports in place afterwards, what we're trying to do is design better from the very beginning. And that's part of my role. I'm heavily involved in program design and development. So having Altitude there to incorporate right. As part of our program design and development, what we've found is, incorporating UDL, and a number of our lecturers have indeed, as you said, taken the UDL badges, both the UDL for Learning and the outside the classroom. What we found is that incorporating this actually improves the experience, not just for those students who might have additional needs or need additional support, but for all of our students. It improves the experience for everybody. It supports retention figures, it makes learning more accessible, and it really enhances our lecturers' teaching practice because it encourages our staff to think differently about how they design and deliver their modules. What Altitude does for us is it creates a really helpful structure. Many institutions, including our own, are already doing good work in this space, but it can be quite fragmented. The Charter gives us a shared framework and a language that can bring that work together and make it more strategic. It helps us to connect the different parts of the organisation. So it's not just about student support, it's about everybody that's involved in the student journey and the student's experience. Quality, student services, the academic teams and so on. So it becomes a collective effort rather than something just sitting in one particular area. We're at a very early stage of our Altitude journey. So we're just beginning the process. As I said, we do it, but we don't have a way of joining it up and having that joint thinking. So what we're going to do is we're setting up a cross-functional group to guide the implementation, mapping what we already do well and identifying where we can strengthen our approach. We're also focusing on our staff engagement because it only works if everybody understands what universal design means in practice and feel confident then in applying that approach. Finally, and I am quick, I think it's really important that private providers are part of this growing national effort. We might operate in slightly different contexts, but we do share the same goals, the better outcomes for all of our learners. Being part of Altitude allows us to contribute to and learn from a collective movement towards a more inclusive and effective education system in Ireland. And that is incredibly invaluable. So I'd like to thank Dara for allowing us to be part of this journey, and we look forward to staying on the train. Thank you.
I'm a regular discusser of the Altitude train, so suddenly it's turned into a train. Yeah, so all aboard message. It's funny, you talked about I'm also an only child, only not lonely, and hopefully we're definitely not lonely on this train. It's getting bigger and bigger. I have the privilege actually in my role of kind of hearing what's happening around the institutions and having that going out and engaging with institutions across the country. So although we have 3 adopters today, there's lots more who just missed this adoption point who are kind of aiming for it but not quite there. And it's interesting that in that grouping we do have higher education institutions, we do have private providers, and we do have ETBs, which is great to see that kind of collective effort. So kind of move on to definitely last not least. So Martha Bulger from KCETB, can you please give a big welcome and congratulations.
Thanks, Dara, and hello and good morning to many colleagues here today. My name is Martha Bulger. I'm the Director of Further Education and Training with Kilkenny and Carlow ETB, and I'm going to, I suppose, follow on from colleagues who spoke yesterday. Our Chief Executive spoke about the strategic alignment of the public sector duty with UD, and indeed colleagues from our largest FET college in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB Carlow Institute of Further Education and Training, spoke about their journey using UD to enhance teaching and learning. But today I'm going to be sharing some thoughts about the public sector duty process and the alignment with the Altitude Charter, but also the maturity model for learners and how they all marry together. And I suppose Dara asked me earlier, why are you coming to the table now or coming on the train to adopt the Altitude Charter? And I thought, well, why wouldn't we jump on this train? The Charter aligns with the FET strategy of agile, digital and sustainable methods for lifelong learning. It aligns with the DFERRIS strategy to provide high quality tertiary education for all. And it also aligns with our Kilkenny and Carlow ETB statement of strategy and the theme of teaching and learning and quality standards, and these were already mentioned this morning. We strive to promote high quality teaching and learning and service delivery standards, and we like to embrace new methodologies and new methods of service deliveries. We continue to collaborate with partners, building evidence and insights for future learning and new models of service delivery. For us in KCETB, the Altitude Charter provides a number of benefits. It provides a really effective approach to compliance, and this was mentioned already. It helps us align with national legislation, policies and statutory obligations in an efficient, staff-friendly and learner-centred way, and we've mentioned some of the policies this morning. It defines the language and culture of inclusion. The nucleus of that inclusion is that shared sense of responsibility for access, for inclusion and universal design. The culture is that inclusion is everyone's business, all our business. I started my VEC and ETB career working in community education, and I see two of my former colleagues here this morning. But those who were most remote from learning came to community halls and parish centres and so on for social and confidence benefits, and they in turn progressed to be active leaders in their own communities. And this is something so simple, but yet so powerful. The Charter has strategic value for us, and I mentioned some of those strategies and policies already, but their commonality is endeavouring to assist us reach goals concerning learner access and retention, as well as widening participation to learners who haven't come to FET yet. And the Charter provides guidance and support. It's a ready-made toolkit. It is our how to do, how to remedy it, and how to live it. For our learners, the Charter provides more equitable opportunities. The most important benefit is the ongoing development of programmes, services, and the environments with which learners learn to thrive and be successful. It's building on that confidence to support learners. Our tagline in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB is "Flourish through learning." And it will provide an enhanced experience for learning by placing human diversity at the heart of the design and delivery of education. The learner experience will be enhanced for everyone, not just those with differing abilities. In Ireland, we seem to have a fix-it culture rather than a preventative culture. Too often we put a sticking plaster on issues that require surgery, redesign and redelivery. Hence in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB is our commitment to Altitude, and as part of the maturity model, we've recently undertaken the AHEAD and ETBI reasonable accommodations in FET maturity model self-review toolkit, looking at the 4 pillars of the Charter. We wanted, I suppose, to see what was happening on the train before we actually jumped on. But in the policy and strategy pillar, we're focusing on learning, teaching and assessment. That's our bread and butter in an ETB. For support, services and social engagement, we're reviewing quality assurance and communications, and also reviewing staffing and professional development for staff. While both the physical environment and digital environment pillars are looking at infrastructure and resources. One of the QA subcommittees undertook to review our policies, including teaching and learning, assessment, access, transfer and progression policy. And in that self-review, we learned that staffing is professional, it's committed, and it goes to unknown lengths every day to support the learner. Professional development opportunities are varied and diverse, and they're both tailored to the group and the individual staff member. However, we have found that training in key areas such as UDL, disability awareness, equality and diversity, is not yet mandatory, or we don't actually track it. In the last month, we've just approved our first equality and diversity policy for staff, So the logical next step will be to roll out training through our PD unit. And there's no reason that a version of this policy cannot be reiterated for learners in due course. We have, like other ETBs, started the development of strategic inclusion units. And to date, we've appointed a FET Learner Support Coordinator. We've developed a staff portal for learner support resources and also for the development of UDL resources. The self-review also highlights that important gaps need to be addressed to ensure consistency across the whole FET service. These include differences in how centres carry out needs assessments and reasonable accommodations assessment. And we also need to improve communications to learners about the supports that they're entitled to. We have infrastructure challenges in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB. We need a building accessibility policy, and we need a clear methodology to report accessibility issues. These challenges are amplified for us by the fact that many of our buildings are old and include protected structures, which can make accessibility even more complex. However, we are planning for the future, and we have been approved for a new College of the Future in Kilkenny, which is well underway, and this shows and demonstrates our long-term commitment to modern, integrated and accessible facilities. To progress some of the recommendations from our self-review, we will be relying on the continued partnership and advocacy of AHEAD, ETBI, Solus and our parent department, DeFerris, and I'm sure I'll be calling on many of you in the room for ideas and again the how-to. All of us will be essential in the next leg of the journey to ensure that Kilkenny and Carlow ETB can deliver high quality and equitable learner supports into the future. The aligning of altitude and our public sector duty commitments establishes a mirrored process for both staff and all stakeholders. The public sector duty requires public bodies to eliminate discrimination, promote equality of opportunity, and protect human rights for staff and our customers who are our learners. UD provides this design framework that enables us in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB to meet these obligations proactively rather than reactively. Our Chief Executive spoke yesterday about this united process of connecting the public sector duty with universal design in order to develop the strategic organisational implementation plan, which has identified key equality and human rights issues, and will outline actions to address them. During 2026, we want to build on the strong foundation of learner councils by developing our first KCETB Learner Engagement Forum to ensure learners are consulted on strategic matters which affect them most in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB. By adopting the Altitude Charter today, we will continue to work for and towards sustainable progress, towards a truly inclusive learning educational experience for learners, who I hope will benefit and reap the rewards from an enhanced culture of access and inclusion. Operationalising the inclusion is everyone's business mindset. I think at the moment when I reflected on this during the week, and to use another journey, I suppose, paraphrase, we're a bit like Jessie Buckley. We've created a ship to stand in, and now we need to ensure that our shipmates are our staff and our learners, and that they can all join the journey with us to a wholly accessible learning environment that has equitable opportunities for all to thrive and be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha. That's absolutely brilliant to hear all the work that's already been going on, and it's great to hear that all of you are already thinking in that kind of structures, governance. What does this look like? How is it going to be socialised? I was going to start with you, Martha, but I'm going to give you a breather because you're only down. So I'm going to go to Anne-Marie first instead. I was just wondering, with the context of Teagasc, what you're doing, like your courses there, largely in the domains of agriculture, horticulture, equine, forestry. It's quite a different context to lots of the other institutions who adopted today. I'm just wondering, I suppose, do you think this is going to make your approach to embedding altitude different? Do you have any thoughts on that? And also, maybe what might you be able to learn from other institutions and vice versa because of the differences in your context?
I think, so no, I don't think it'll make, it shouldn't make a big difference. You know, if anything, I think we have a wonderful opportunity because there's such diversity within the programs as it sits that we can learn an awful lot from each program. You know, so agriculture is quite different to equine and forestry, and even maybe sometimes our weakness has been like communities of practice. Are we bringing people together enough? Well, how are you teaching? And can we bring that back? So I attended one day a class where it's an equine program where somebody had a mare out and they had drawn on the outside of the horse, you know, the kind of alimentary canal, the digestive system. They put in some of the muscles. Real UDL in action. You know, a very quiet mare also to add. But, you know, showing, and then it was, you know, other teachers went away saying, golly, I could do that with tractor parts. I could do that in forestry, you know. So I think there's a real uniqueness of that. But we definitely need to get a bit better at how we communicate that and how we're not all in silos, even within Teagasc, of teaching and education and facilities. And, you know, we've often had where maybe learners with physical disabilities and colleges have, you know, responded really well, but are we learning from each other in that? So I think there's pros and cons, particularly when you're across so many centres also. But definitely, I think for us in Teagasc, we need to learn from everybody else, you know, and the road travelled and what works and you know, different insights that people have. And I think also my big takeaway even from the last 2 days and the last couple of weeks of getting our head around governance and our working group, and it's not, you know, some people have said to me back at base, are you making more work for us, Anne-Marie? You know, so it's normalising that conversation and like we have buy-in from our senior management, but at the same time, you know, it's the buy-in you need from the teachers and technicians and admin and farm staff. You know, we have a lot of farm staff as well, and you have a lot of health and safety to keep right because we have, you know, they're all fully functioning farms with fully functioning machines, and accidents happen. You know, agriculture is a dangerous place to work. So at all times you just want to keep, you know, your eye on all of those pieces. But I think from all the people who've been here, a lot of it for us is learning those small little bits. And we have found in the last couple of weeks what's worked really well is, you know, maybe 40-minute sessions where guest speakers come in and just, you know, normalise. So like one example yesterday that struck me was it Patricia was talking about graphics and communication. Maybe it wasn't Patricia, but graphics and communication and Moodle. So we use Moodle, and I was just looking up thinking that is something we could very easily bring back. And they're very small changes, but very powerful changes. So it's super.
I love that sense you're talking about joining the dots between different areas of the institution, which is really all what it's about. But I suppose, like, I often think it is strange that when we have these conversations before, we've had institutions who do have really strong commitments to, say, for example, UDL. But even yesterday, there was a brilliant presentation about the spatial environment and how that really is closely connected to the experiences of both teachers and learners. And yet we rarely bring our teachers together with those who develop the spatial environment to discuss these matters of inclusion and what that looks like in a teaching context, and how the shape of our spaces and the decisions that are made within those campus development teams shape what an educator can do in their practice in that way. Yeah. So it's really interesting that you're kind of already thinking about those things. I was just wondering, Karen, about your position as a private institution. There's a growing number of these jumping on board, and I said from the stage there, it's been a sort of lovely surprise. Well, not a surprise, but something that we hadn't really put a lot of strategic thought into in that first year because we had a strong focus there. But I'm just wondering then about sitting outside of, you mentioned sitting outside these public funding frameworks an awful lot of the time, often as well outside, you know, public duties like those that have been mentioned throughout the conference. So, like, what is that key motivation? You talk to someone about where's the driver inside that's saying we need to get involved in this type of effort. Where's the key motivation?
I think City College Dublin comes from a kind of unique perspective in the sense that not only are we a private provider, but we also have HE students and FET students. And I think, you know, we cover a lot in terms of quality for the HE students, but maybe it's kind of neglected a little bit across the FET students. You know, we have student support officers, we have a new toolkit, Success at City, which is designed to help all of our learners, you know, to achieve the best outcomes that they can. You know, the support aspect is there for the HE students, and especially for our further education students in the online space, it's not as developed as it probably should be. And as we move forward into, you know, that more digital approach to learning, we need to remember those learners who are outside of the on-site space. So I think what Altitude does, and it's one of the things that attracted us to it, aside from all of the other advantages that it brings, the framework notwithstanding, and as a student-centred organisation, it allows us to, you know, incorporate all of that across all of the college. What it does is it's an opportunity to join up the thinking between FET and HE, and to make the college and the campus and the learner experience inclusive for everybody, regardless of whether they're going into tertiary education or just expanding their knowledge at further education.
Yeah, that's something that's been a great strength of this charter, is that sort of tertiary focus. You know, I mentioned yesterday, I think the project team was 52 members across those zones, but what we were often finding is that these people who were sometimes quite senior in their organisations had never been in a collaborative project with someone from the higher ed space, if they're in the education training boards or vice versa. So that became a real strength of the project, because when we were looking, for example, within the charter to lay out examples of implementation structures, we began to see, okay, these are going to look quite different in different spaces, and people were going, oh, that's how it works over there. That's interesting, you know, like. So there's all this brilliant shared value, shared understanding that's happening. So I think hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about the Altitude community that's being developed as we close here today. So hopefully there's an opportunity for that to grow and to have lots of the voice of the private colleges at that table.
I think so, and I think even listening to my colleagues here this morning, unfortunately I couldn't be here yesterday, and it looks like I missed out really, but even listening to some of your approaches and some of your approaches, there's things now that I will absolutely be taking back and sharing, you know, amongst my colleagues in the college, to help to promote this even further.
I'm just wondering about yourself, Martha, about Lindsay spoke yesterday, and you kind of doubled down on that today as the public sector duty as being a really key driver. One of the things that also spoke to what you said there, Anne-Marie, about this fear of the additional load. And I think one of the things we have to be really careful as we navigate this implementation is not to create a separate group over here, that, like, where there's already an existing group that has. So it's about how we weave the threads of this stuff together and see that kind of synergy. Just wondering about the public sector duty group that you have, and how you've been going down that road. How do you see that as a core driver?
So I suppose we've just jumped on the train as well. We had dipped our toes in the water last year, where we had nearly 100 staff complete an online module through the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission on public sector duty, and that went down really, really well. So by looking at the public sector duty and looking at our rights as a statutory employer and organisation, we've started a steering group. We've started one for climate action and the Irish language as well. But in the steering group, it's going to be comprised of representatives from staff. We put out an expression of interest, so we want those staff to actually champion the work that we're doing. A lot of the heavy lifting can be taken on, you know, by ourselves in developing policies. We're also working with the Irish Centre for Diversity, who, to give us bronze accreditation last year, came in and surveyed the policies that we have to support staff in this process. And again, we have found gaps in our policies of what we need to do. Even something like simple as the equality and diversity policy. You know, it's a very simple policy, but can be very effective and can be very, I suppose, strategic and overarching in pulling a group of policies together. But by familiarising staff with our steering group, and then putting on training, be it the 40 minutes at lunchtime, be it a strategic day where we look at, you know, our obligations and how far we've come on the journey, I think involving the staff in the process is absolutely key. It can't be just a top-down approach or carrot and stick where this is what we have to do to meet the obligation. We need staff, no more than universal design. We need staff with us on the journey, and we need them to feed in. We need to consult. And I suppose in this case, the staff are probably like the learners. We need their feedback and their opinions and what works well on the ground and what doesn't. The same as with learners and garnering their feedback. We've also, I suppose, just worked with SETU, and we're starting a level 8 module just after Easter in equality, diversity and inclusion. About 30 hours of in-depth training for key members of staff. We've opened it up to the senior leadership team and those who will be on the public sector duty implementation group, and we've had a great response to date. So we're looking forward to really, I suppose, not just being on the journey, but actually really immersing ourselves now that we're here.
That's brilliant to hear. So much going on there already. Yeah, I suppose just to close, because I can see time is coming up on us, I'm going to ask you just really quickly in your kind of 30-second snapshot. I suppose what we're trying to do often with our universal design approach is that proactive, inclusive design. So I wonder just if you could tell us, I suppose really what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve the problems of tomorrow as well as address the ones that we have today. But we're trying to look ahead and say, Anne-Marie was talking about the spheres of workload. We're saying this is a proactive workload, so that you don't have to do the work when it becomes a big problem down the line. That's often what we're trying to do. So I'm wondering if you could look ahead to maybe 5 years' time. What do you hope will have changed within your organisation and will have changed for your learners through the adoption of Altitude? What's your hope on that? Anne-Marie, I'm going to start with you if that's okay and come backwards.
Yeah, at all times, and I mentioned, for me, it's equivalence of learner experience. I have 2 kids at home, a 13 and a 16-year-old, who are busy looking at my daughter, anyway, 16, in colleges. So what I want to ensure from a Teagasc perspective and Altitude allow is that our learner is well supported, our staff are well supported, and that when somebody chooses hopefully to study with us, that journey is a good journey for everybody, irrespective of their diagnosis, their disclosed needs. We'd find, as mentioned earlier, we have a lot of students who do not tell us their need, and we kind of discover it around Christmas. And it was mentioned again yesterday, I think Cork ETB, that it's a short window. So in 5 years' time, I'd like to think that we understand ourselves better, we understand learners better, and that we can make that journey smoother for everybody.
Lovely, lovely. Karen, what about you?
I think for me, it's more about that in 5 years' time, that this is not something we're just talking about, that it's actually embedded into our organisations, into our programmes, right from the very start, so that we're not reactive, but we're more proactive.
Lovely, lovely. The final word to you.
5 years' time, I'd like to see that we have improved the experience for both staff and learners, and that we have a broad cohort of differing abilities of both staff and learners able to work and able to learn in Kilkenny and Carlow ETB.
I love that. That's the parity of esteem you're placing there between learners and staff and considering all that. So can you give a big round of applause to our 3 adopters, please?
Okay.
So just to close this session really quickly, I'll actually skip past some of this because a lot of this has been talked about, but I wanted to give some early examples of how this charter has been socialised, but actually 2 of these were covered really well in sessions yesterday. The hackathon that took place down in Altitude, that thing that Martha was speaking to about involving staff in the process, I thought that was such a great example, and a really brilliant example from Cork ETB as well, who are hosting a Universal Design Month this month, but everything being framed within those 4 pillars and trying to connect the professionals within there to discuss more around it. I thought this example from TUS, who gave me permission to share it, was really nice. They focused in year 1 because they felt it was their biggest area that they had to look at, is about what they could do in the physical space. Obviously, those things often take a lot of time, a lot of strategic energy, so it's about attacking it where they could within the strategy and the governance structure. So they were actually producing at the time a 10-year campus development plan. And as a result of that, they've actually included universal design as a kind of underlying principle within a plan. They have a whole section on it within their campus development plan, and they've actually translated the Altitude physical and digital pillars as key principles within that. And then I thought a lovely way of demonstrating how that plays out in reality is that they took their standard risk register that has to be completed as part of the sort of application for all new capital projects, and they've embedded a standing risk in there around the lack of universal design being embedded in the project. So it has to be actually assessed at the point of beginning to conceptualize this project. So I thought that was lovely because it gives a flavour of what we're trying to do here. It's like, how do we make this more sustainable by putting it into the language of our policy and strategy environment? So I suppose I'm going to close this session just by giving you a wee heads up about a really exciting initiative. Louise kind of nodded to it. She gave away the game in in her opening remarks. But I suppose we're really excited in ahead to work with really committed group of professionals from the original Altitude project group that we're colloquially calling the Altitude Activation Group, which are supporting us to shape a national community of practice around altitude. So what that's going to do really is try to bring together professionals from private providers, from ETBs and from HUIs, who are both kind of tackling the political challenges of embedding altitude in terms of what that looks like in your governance structures, and where you're having experiencing challenges with buy-in, those kinds of things, but then also trickle down and give examples of good practice within the 4 pillars. So we are hosting a town hall, I suppose much to the spirit that Martha alluded to about getting people involved in that, is to actually shape the design of that community. It's happening on May 6th at 11:30 to 1 o'clock, and it's basically a discursive event that will try to figure out what does this community need from a national community, and how we can shape that community to really work for everybody and get what they need from it to advance universal design within their own institution. So I'll actually leave that up there through the next break. Since it's one of my last opportunities to speak from the stage, and for someone with my ego, that's a really nervous place to be. I just want to take the opportunity to thank a few people while I'm up here. Just to thank the board of AHEAD as a group, who were just a fantastic bunch of professionals. But to pay a particular credit today to Blake Hodkinson, who's just stepped down from the board. He has given 6 years service to the board. They often do very thankless work as volunteers behind the scene. Blake took many a call from me to help me to steer my way through an issue or get a read on something that was happening in the sector. So he's been a fantastic support. So just to say a huge thank you, Blake, for everything that you've given. To Professor Michael Shevin, who I hope is in the room somewhere. He said he was hoping to join us today, but Michael Shevin was the prior chair of AHEAD who stepped down this time last year. But actually, his impact on this sector as a whole is absolutely enormous, and I don't think lots of us would be in the position we are today without them. And similarly to colleagues in UCD Access and Lifelong Learning, who I think some of them are here again today. But just to say that I suppose they haven't been up here in a plenary session on the stage, so I wanted to call out their immense contribution to this space, to leading universal design, to even shaping some of the ways that we're thinking about the altitude, the pillars, etc. A lot of those things come from work that they have been heavily involved in, and they've been huge contributors to this effort. So they're also great partners AHEAD in a number of projects, which I know you'd probably be aware of. Okay, so